Fire Emblem Fates is an extremely polarizing game for me because it does so much right, but just as much wrong. Fates is one of the most addicting experiences I've ever had. One of the most difficult games I've ever played. Its soundtrack is stuck in my head to this day. So why am I ambivalent? Well, let's go back to the year Fates released. I wasn't planning on buying it, but two of my friends in high school were huge fans of Fire Emblem Awakening. Like, one of them owned the special edition 3DS, and the other declared Crom as her husbando. So I really couldn't avoid seeing or hearing about the franchise on a regular basis. You get enough exposure, and yeah, I became curious, so I thought I'd be a wholesome friend and pre-order Fates so we'd have something new to bond over. One of the appeals to Fates is that the game is split into two versions like Pokemon, but this time, each game is drastically different. Different stories, different levels, but the main thing to consider as a newcomer is that the Birthright version would be easier, and Conquest would be harder. So I picked Conquest. I mean, you might as well start with the game that intrinsically makes you want to shove a cocktail toothpick under your toenail and slam it into a wall. I'm not kidding around. This is one of the toughest video games I've ever played. And technically speaking, I still haven't beat it under the parameters I want to. There's two ways to play a Fire Emblem game, classic and casual. In classic, when a character dies, it's permanent. They can't be used for the rest of the game. But in casual, they'll return. If you want the true Fire Emblem experience, you're playing classic. There's no better feeling than clearing a level without any of your units dying, but it will come at the cost of compulsive neurosis sucking your mental health dry. Levels can take an hour on a successful attempt, so imagine what it's like losing 55 times. Coming into this review, I knew I wasn't beating Conquest on classic. I just don't have the time or the emotional fortitude. But there was one level I wanted to pass before tapping out and going casual because I respected that much. That being said, casual is not an invalid way to play Fire Emblem. You still have to think your moves through and play optimally. Losing a tank can snowball into defeat rapidly, but having the opportunity to use B tier units as fodder to lure an enemy or get chip damage on a boss is something that makes the game so much more pleasant. As much as I think classic is the way to play, I don't want to do it ever again. But before we get into the level talk, let's cover Conquest's story. It's a commonly shared opinion that Fate's story is ass. It's basic and full of filler. Characters are one-dimensional and their actions hardly make sense. There's a lot of bullshit that happens that's confusing and unsatisfying, but to me, this is one of those so bad it's good types of tales because of the occurrences. And a root cause for these issues is that Fates has one of the worst protagonists ever conceived. Corrin, aka Freddy the Ferret in my headcanon. This guy here, he's the second coming of Christ, a Mary Sue, and a manic pixie dream girl rolled into the body of a barefoot scaly with the personality of a slab of cardboard. Fates takes place on a continent with two feuding kingdoms, Nor and Hoshido. What are they fighting about? I don't know. One king killed the other king over the last ice cream sandwich or something. The game never elaborates. But these details are also important because Corrin is dead king's kid, but evil king wanted a fifth child for his tax write-off, so now you, the main character, went from being a prince to being a prince. The entire opening of the game is learning your dad sucks after living with him for 2 decades, which is a weird amount of time to let pass considering the economy has crashed and half the country's population has been sentenced to death since he took the throne. It's only when King Garen orders Corrin to kill someone that signals him to think that maybe this guy, who I call Dad, who has never told me he loves me, is a little fucked in the head. So Corrin says no, and for the rest of the game, Garen makes it his sworn duty to ensure Corrin suffers by repeatedly thrusting him into lethal environments. But he should have known better than to mess with the guy who has plot armor. Corrin's first assignment is to scout enemy territory in the middle of nowhere, and he even gets a cool demonic sword that will in no way attempt to kill him. Oops. But it's okay, because Dragon Girl love interest, who was the least fleshed out character in the entire game, appears out of nowhere and saves his life. And now we're in the capital of Hoshido, passing the pigskin around with our birth family like we never lost time. We meet our mommy, who has one of the coolest outfits in the game, and Azura, who was a Norian princess that Hoshido kidnapped in retaliation for stealing Corrin. Yeah, they were producing a spin-off of Wife Swap, but with children, except the children are never returned, resulting in a future of deep-seated grass is greener syndrome and a world without therapy. I also just need to point out this line of dialogue from earlier that explicitly mentions Hoshido is protected with a barrier of magic that Nor can't infiltrate. And that's important because 1 hour later they infiltrated and killed the queen, and blew up the entire capital, all with the sword Garen gave Corrin. And subsequently, Corrin transforms into a dragon because his blood compelled him or some shit. So that's 2 important characters that were killed off immediately that make me feel nothing. Me to my sleep paralysis demons. This was already a chaotic and packed scene, but just to spill the waters of absurdity over the rim, this statue that was destroyed in the explosion contains the sentient, legendary sword Yato, which, according to old dead people, will bring about world peace with a hero of its choosing. And what perfect timing, since just a minute ago, our sword kinda fucking broke. And that kicks off the point where the player has to decide which family they want to live with. Jeepers, I wonder what sign I'll pick. Interestingly, the digital version of Fates keeps things neutral, where you don't have to commit to a side until this moment. But with all the marketing going around, I can't imagine many people didn't know what game they want to play before making the purchase. Fates really likes to paint its sides in black and white. HiJello is good, Nor is bad, but we don't know enough about either family to properly make this decision. Like, do I want to come back home to my father who kidnapped me and wants me dead? Or do I want to crush those peaceful like the little maggots they are? So that goes back to the barest difference. Easy game versus hard game. But for many, it was has Camilla versus doesn't. I'm not gonna beat around the bush. Camilla is the big titty goth girlfriend that guys wish was real. Her entire character can be summarized as your big sister with the fat yonks who was obsessed with you to an unsettling degree. This is the type of character that's got men barking on Twitter. I swear, a sizable amount of Fates sales has to be credited to Camilla. I remember seeing so much horny discussion about her online. And if you want to accuse me of buying Conquest because of Camilla, I'll say yes for the meme. Let me also mention there's a third game besides Conquest and Birthright. Exclusive to the special edition and DLC, you have the option to hurt everyone's feelings. Revelation, the canon story that reveals secrets the base game's concealed. I'm only covering Conquest in this video, but I'm not opposed to the idea of reviewing the other paths 62 years from now. The story after coincides with Nor is gonna take a snooze for a bit. The war will rest on the back burner for 9 chapters as Garen thrusts Corrin into deadly situations with each one padding out our squad. We're gonna keep encountering the Hoshidan army, but it's more like running into your mate at the grocery store. One of our tasks is to find a man called the Rainbow Sage who lives on a mountain that allegedly is so dangerous that anyone who climbs it dies. Well, that would be great if it were true, because everybody lives. The sage tosses some magic into the Yato, and then Garen's sidekick, Edward Scissorhand-looking ass, shoots out an email ordering us to kill the sage or don't come home. And I need to point out that Corrin is trying to play pacifist mode, so the entire story, he miraculously ends a war without blood on his hands. And the most cop-out solution for this conundrum is that the Rainbow Sage just shuts off his heart manually and dies right there. Like, what the fuck? When I said nobody died on the mountain, actually one character got pneumonia. And then they cure it right away. Oh! In chapter 14, Azura performs a song in front of Garen, and it is quite possibly the funniest thing on this planet. When you nut, but she's still sucking. After that, there's a detour to Vala, a world Azura has some connection to that you need to spend $20 to learn about. And it's because of this location that Corrin learns that Garen is actually some kind of monster that needs to be vanquished. This prompts Azura to propose murdering thousands of innocent lives in a convoluted scheme to trick Garen's kids into slaughtering him. And that kicks off the Conquest part of Fire Emblem Fates Conquest. Ethnic cleansing because the blue-haired waifu said so. Now it's up for debate whether or not this is more effective than Corrin coming back home with a shotgun, but I suppose the option we get to play out may result in a peace treaty between the kingdoms. Guess how well that works out. The story gets pretty simple after that. Each chapter we get a bit closer to Oshido's castle, body count is 0, except for the part where we nuke an entire race of furries into extinction. There's a chapter where a bunch of mindless Norian monsters appear and kill the dragon girl, and when I said the story is so bad it's good, this scene perfectly exemplifies that. Lilith is unbelievably irrelevant. She has nothing. Corrin's mother dies in his arms, but this is the death that hurt him more. Fates kills characters for the sake of killing them, but Lilith died for no reason after being absent for 14 chapters, and the game acts like this isn't the most tone-deaf thing they've concocted. Eventually, we cross paths with all of Corrin's Hoshido siblings, and he tries to spare them. The boys commit suicide, but hey, what can you do? Garen walks away to pray to his god after winning the war, so in the meantime, we retire our oath of pacifism to brutally dismember his separate army limb from limb because screw those guys. Money! And then Garen is so taken aback that he has to sit down and process the situation. But bad move, buddy, because the chair transforms him into his true form. This is what I look like after browsing through my 6 terabytes of private goo material. So now we have to kill Dad, and what's that? A new final boss has appeared? The fucking pineapple? Oh, this scene is really weird because Corrin is like, "My brother in Christ, I know you're mad at me, Takumi. So please, release your emotions by firing arrows into my heart. Then, perhaps you will come to terms with the fact that I am single-handedly responsible for your entire life sucking, and that everybody you love is dead or has developed PTSD, all because of me." So he fucking kills Corrin. The end. Corrin wakes up in limbo, is reunited with his mother and brother, then Takumi appears in this world too and kills him a second time, and it turns out we've been living in hell all along. But yeah, Takumi dies, Xander becomes king, Hinoka becomes queen, they vow to create a future of peace and prosperity, boobs. All in all, not a bad story, but very basic. It's troubling that I could summarize the adventure in 2 acts. The Garen tortures Corrin half, and the invasion of Hoshido half. What would have made it more interesting is the human condition, because that's my solution for everything. I want to hear more from the cast and the struggles they're battling. How does living in Nor under the rule of Garen affect their thoughts, desires, beliefs, fears? This game is so focused on getting Corrin the touchdown that a lot of the world feels forgotten. I understand that it's a video game first, and that pockets of lore do exist, but man, does it feel like there's so much wasted potential. The good news is, Conquest has levels and gameplay that carry this game into an unforgettable experience. So I guess this is the part where I come out as an idiot. Did you know it took me over 100 hours to figure out what the speed stat does? Or that it took 180 hours to learn what these shield icons mean? Fire Emblem is like chess, except it plays nothing like it at all. That was just the best metaphor I could come up with. Every piece is different. They have their own unique stats, abilities, sexual preference. It's basically chess. At its simplest, you're either walking up to an enemy and killing them, or you're putting one of your own units into their range to lure them in for a beatdown. But after a few chapters, the game teaches you there's much more depth to this format. Weapons are kind of a big deal. Depending on the character's class, they'll specialize in different doohickeys to stab people with. There's swords, axes, lances, bows, magic, and shurikens. And to keep people from relying on a select few, these weapons counter each other in a deranged version of rock, paper, scissors. With that, no character will be built for every situation, so it encourages constructing a balanced army. Weapons also have a dozen variants to worry about, and each one affects your stats differently. Some have increased range, some use magic, this one was made by someone who really hates horses, and this one's a bottle. The further you get into the game, the more you'll have to see what your enemies are wielding. Considering you only get like 4 tanky characters in the game, running into a horde of soldiers that can instantly negate 1 or 2 of them makes levels really stressful. Fortunately, there's a whole other mechanic to help in these situations. Pairing up units is Fate's bread and butter. When 2 of your units are on adjacent tiles, they'll fight together, and if you stack them, they'll receive stat boosts at the cost of only 1 attacking. For me, this is the game's most interesting mechanic. Both methods of positioning have benefits and flaws, and learning when to use them is important to your success. Putting 2 units next to each other is great because 2 rounds of damage can tip the scales into your favor, but leaving a character open for retaliation can instantly seal their fate. Sometimes you'll have to waste a turn to shelter a weaker unit or split them apart, and on a lot of maps, you're not going to have that luxury of time for the option. One of the best advantages of stacking units is access to the shield gauge. This fills up whenever the duo attacks, gets hit, or dodges. And maxed out, it grants 1 free block, basically invincibility. Don't be like me, learn how to use this immediately, because timing when you'll get the block allows for much more aggressive decisions, and it will make some of the toughest boss fights tolerable. Another benefit to having characters work together, whether they're stacked or separated, is that the unity improves their relationship. The greater their bond, the better their stats will be in combat. And every time their liaison strengthens, more goodies will be unlocked. But that's another topic for later. Each character has the propensity to learn mad skills. Depending on the character's class, they'll learn abilities that provide advantages in battle. Some are stat buff, some will weaken the enemy if they survive their last battle. It's stuff you won't think about too often, but it's the ability to know 6 at a time that makes these fun to analyze. Characters have 1 skill exclusive to them, and 5 more they can learn leveling up. But like I said, it's all based on their class. Every character can reclass to learn more skills, and from there you can customize how you want anybody to play. The thing is, the game limits what you can reclass to and how many skills you can learn in a single playthrough with its level cap. But if you have 1,000 hours to burn, multiple copies of the game or consoles, and DLC, Every character can learn just about any skill you want them to. One of the characters I was toying around with is Odin Dark. You meet him as a dark mage who starts with the skill Heartseeker, which improves his accuracy. But you can reclass him into a samurai, which learns skills that increase his evasion, and grants him the ability to attack first when his health is below half. Promote him into a swordmaster to get a +5 attack boost and a roll for a unique critical hit, and then reclass into a sorcerer temporarily for another unique critical hit roll, and you've got yourself a monster. And on top of that, Odin's unique skill is a buff to his crit rate if his weapon has a nickname. So I present to you Laswasserdonk. But just wait, because towards the end game you can customize a sword with a high crit rate and it stacks with Odin's abilities. So get used to seeing this on screen.
You can't hide from me. Power overflowing.
This is the moment I've been waiting for. I want to gush about Conquest maps. I don't even play Fire Emblem, but on the whole spectrum of gaming, these are some of the best design levels I've ever encountered. A lot of maps are set up in ways that provide a very cautious experience. Enemies are positioned so well on some levels where you'll feel pressure from multiple directions for multiple turns, but with the right strategy, you'll find a way to persevere. And then there's the Dragon Vein. Some maps have tiles that the royal family can activate to alter the battlefield. These are a great inclusion because part of the gameplay is strategizing when you should use one, and it doesn't feel like a gimmick because the levels are designed around the dragon veins and not the other way around. This map with the frozen lake, for instance, for one turn you can melt it and turn anyone into an immobile Jesus. Or on this map with the pots full of medicine and poison, you can break them one by one, but the dragon vein can obliterate them all at once, hotboxing the entire arena. All the maps are great for one reason or another, but there's a few I want to put the spotlight on, and I cannot go any longer without talking about Chapter 10. Simply put, this is one of the best levels I've ever played in a video game. Up to this point, your goal has been to seize territory, root the enemy, or beat a boss. All in all, they're structured very similarly, and after doing them for 9 levels, you should have a comfortable playstyle developed. And then Chapter 10 comes by and declares it's gut check time. You are the boss now, bitch. Those 4 tiles behind you, guard them with your life. What makes this map so great is that it's designed to make you uncomfortable and to adapt, improvise, and overcome. In past levels, you could get away with turtling from start to finish, but that's not gonna work here. All your units are gonna be separated. Each one will always be working on something, and if they aren't, you better be ready for the chaos that is turn 7. Takumi pulls out a straw and he says, "That's a nice looking ocean." Oh, you thought this map was going to be easy? That's cute. Without the water, enemy units can beeline to the back quicker, and their paths will converge. And with more reinforcements spawning in each turn, it's easy to get overwhelmed. I can't specifically recall how long it took me to beat this chapter way back when, but I remember being so anxious that my heart rate was probably on the brink of a panic attack. Dude, my body was making fumes. I was sweating it up. I've never put that much energy into anything in my entire life, but I wanted that victory so bad. When I started this playthrough, I wanted to beat Chapter 10 on Classic again without my units dying before switching over to Casual, and it took me about 5 hours. 4 hours in, I got a run where the bag was secured. None of the enemies were close enough to reach the back of the map, and all my units were out of their range to fight. Except for Odin. I was hoping if I put him in the opposite direction, nobody would touch him. But these sore-ass losers knew they couldn't win, so they took out their frustrations on Odin and turned him into a pretzel. Like, that's my guy. Oh, I was pissed, and then my battery died, so I beat the level off camera. Chapter 15 isn't comparable in difficulty. It's a neat map because you only have 3 units to use, but the reason I brought it up is because it has one of Fate's best songs. I said it at the beginning, but I love this game's music. I'd probably even call it my favorite soundtrack in any video game. Like, if I randomly start humming a song, more often than not, it's from Fates. That's just an effect of playing the same level for 10 hours straight. But one of the coolest things about the music is how it transitions between a calm and dynamic version where the camera zooms in and out of battles. The flow, fire, and storm versions of songs are really some of the best pieces of music I've ever listened to. Do yourself a favor and look up some of these tracks, because I'm not going to pad this video out with them. I hate when reviewers do that. And something I'll never forgive Nintendo for is ignoring this incredible soundtrack in Super Smash Bros. Corn was DLC for the Wii U and 3DS versions, so understandably only 2 songs were packed in, and really it was 2 variants of Lost in Thoughts all alone. And then Smash Ultimate came out a couple years later, which is great timing for a recent game with awesome songs, and what do? I can't believe it. Chapter 20 is another difficult and well-designed map that left an impression on me. What makes this one special is that gusts of wind will push units in certain tiles up or down at preset turns. This is a map that restricts your actions because poor positioning can scatter your army and place them into the enemy's embrace. This is a map I remember spending a lot of time on during my no-death run because it kind of devolves into a game of memory with a boss that can easily knock someone out. You play a level as complicated as this, and suddenly you're memorizing 200 actions in a single sequence because it's the only way you can guarantee a path to the end. Chapter 21 and beyond is where Fate stops being fun on a no-death run. From this point on, the only way I was able to beat chapters was by cheesing them. This map in particular isn't that overwhelming, but it encourages getting through it as fast as possible, as reinforcements accumulate in front and behind you. To my surprise, I cleared it deathless on this playthrough by going through it normally and getting especially lucky dodges, but the cheese strats I mentioned before involved reclassing a bunch of units into flyers who could skip the entire map. Chapter 22 is Sakura's map. I think it's kind of sad she's dressed up like her mother. It's giving me flashes of that King of the Hill episode where Bill dresses as Lenore.
Why do you keep calling me Bill?
My cheese came in completely ignoring the right side of the map. You're supposed to split your army into 2 teams and use dragon veins to open narrow passages, but the right side has so many projectiles that I found it easier to power through the left. Chapter 23 only sucks because the top of this wall is filled with units that can easily pick off one of your own, so what I do is send out one bulky unit up and down the stairs to solo everyone and heal up. Chapter 24 has a gimmick where dragon veins affect how far units can travel. When we use it, grounded units can move further and flying units trudge along, and when Hinoka uses it, the roles are reversed. So the only way I have no death to this level is to fly all the way to the top and beat it as fast as I can. And then there's Chapter 25, the point during my first playthrough when I realized I fucked up. This is a map where you just have to beat the boss, but you can only use Corrin. Well, I didn't do a good job raising him, so my only option was to clear out the map with the rest of my team, and since I was cheesing the last 4 chapters, everybody was too weak to do that. So I did what any sensible person would do, and I started a new file, replaying the entire game and adding 40 or so hours to my playthrough, making sure to use Corrin a lot more while still cheesing through 21 to 24. And it worked. I also have to point out how ridiculous this level is. Ryoma wants his revenge, but he'll patiently stay put for 25 turns while I hack away at him. What a nice guy. Chapter 26. I have no idea how I beat this deathless because this is how many characters I got to survive on casual. It's another divide and conquer level. I say go right. Chapter 27. What makes this level suck is that 6 of your characters will be randomly warped to a room they may or may not have an advantage in. So my foolproof solution to optimize warp RNG is to only use Effie. Problem solved. The shitty thing about this chapter though is that you have to beat 2 levels in a row without saving in between. Endgame, the final challenge, and the only level I can't beat without a death. There's too many enemies on screen and you're constantly getting pressured to move forward because of reinforcements. If I didn't have to sit through Effie Simulator every time I want to attempt this level, I'd probably beat it by now, but I could never find an optimal strategy. What's also weird is that Takumi cloned himself. I suppose if you want gods to think you're amongst them, this is the way to do it. But my favorite little detail is that his Fujin Yumi has been renamed. There's 3 ways to pronounce this bow. One is Esque. Another one is Escale. And then the other one is Skitty. The last stuff we'll talk about all exists within the hub world. Most will be ignored, but there's definitely a lot of controversy here. Support conversations. I said that when units are paired together, their relationship will improve. And when that happens, a short discussion between those characters is unlocked. A lot of them are really uninteresting, especially since every character in this game is a trope first and a cliche second. You'll unlock some nuggets of intrigue here and there, like the Niles and Felicia C support is a delight. Really anything Niles does or says is funny. Have you heard this guy's crit quote?
Oh, yes.
Or whenever he uses his lockpicking skill, you have to sit through this dialogue every time. This is the lockpicking outlaw, and today we'll be picking a wooden treasure chest. 1 is loose, 2 is set, 3 is set, small click out of 4, let's try 1 again. Okay folks, as you can see, this product provides very little security, and I have stolen the loot inside. Laszlo and Camilla have an interesting moment in their support conversations. I am beyond angry, Laszlo. I am furious. One might even say livid. But why? What have I done to offend you? Among Us. Jokes aside, support conversations do have a purpose. Sex. Get 2 lovebirds to S level and they'll pop out a baby boy. Fire Emblem. More like shipping emblem. Who cares how toxic the relationship is? We can have incest. This is one of the most tacked on and tactlessly written features. When characters have a child, they get sent to the deep realms, an astral plane where it only takes 2 months to be legal. Let's ignore the fact their brain is severely underdeveloped. This game lets you bang your little sister's daughter. And as bad as this is, I will say that children are a good addition, but only because they unlock more levels and give you another unit. Kids also inherit skills from their parents, which reminds me of breeding Pokemon if this wasn't uncomfortable enough. And all of that isn't even the most controversial thing about Fates. And the hub is the private quarters. Here you can invite your coworker over in the evening and stare at their chest. If only we could pet them. Exclusive to Japan is skin shipping, whatever the fuck that is. I've never heard the word before, and I've never heard it since. Fates released in Japan half a year before the rest of the world, and this mode was making headlines. It got so much attention that Nintendo of America announced they were removing it from the localized version of the game. Censorship. That's a word that made thousands of people irrationally upset. This was a period where Nintendo fanboys thought they were fan men. It was 2015, the Wii U was failing, Iwata passed away, Chibi Robo Ziplash came out. Not a great time to be Nintendo. I don't have any recollection on the reputation of Nintendo's localization efforts, but there was enough anger to start a movement. Operation Torrential Downpour. Its goal was to stop Nintendo from removing content in their own games. A noble cause with porn at its epicenter. It didn't work.
No more torrential downpours, Sir God. No more of those.
As we close out the video, there's a few odds and ends I want to talk about, like the cast of voice actors. Not that it's an oddity or anything, but I like being able to recognize a character's voice actor from other media. It's impossible not to recognize Anthony Del Rio, as he uses the exact same voices of Pit and Dark Pit for Silas and Percy. Elizabeth Daly is pretty easy to catch, as Hinoka sounds like Buttercup. But it's funny to think that Nintendo was able to hire her, but the Rugrats in Paris video game studio couldn't. Hearing Paul Eiding as an additional voice is a slap in the face, because it's Max Tennyson. Ben Diskin, I think, is doing number 2 for HiJello, and I know I'll look crazy for this one because it's a different sounding character, but Cam Clark's Corrin really does remind me of his work as Freddy the Ferret from Barnyard. Perhaps. Did you know this game has amiibo support? I forgot it did. The only amiibo I have that works is Lucina, which unlocks a short level and lets her join your army. This game's cover art is sweet, and I really mean that. Something about the composition just feels right, like it's the Last Supper. I actually bought the 3DS theme with this illustration on my capture card because I like it that much. And fuck, I just gotta unload some memes I was holding on to.
Be gone!
My unit's pairing is Astrology GF and BF. I will grant you the most divine death if you'll let me hear you scream. This quote goes so fucking hard.
Come again. Or don't.
Now that's a mood. There you go, Fire Emblem Fates Conquest. A fun, miserable, addicting game with a story so sloppy, it's ironically enjoyable. I hope all the weird, fanservice-y, fetishy, redacted parts don't detract you from the experience, because most of it can be avoided. I just assume Intelligent Systems put that shit in here, because not making a classic Paper Mario game for a decade does that to a studio's well-being. And like I said, I'm open to playing the other branches of Fate, even though they are commonly considered some of the worst games in the franchise. I'm sure I could come up with another joke or two to make another 40-hour playthrough worth it. Or I could summarize them as they are, and it would probably be even funnier. Just don't expect anything for a couple of years. Thanks for watching the video, I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to leave a like as it'll help the channel grow, and subscribe to get updates on my uploads as soon as they happen. But until then, I will see you all next time.